Annyeong! Welcome to Dollightful. This is less of a sketch with me episode and more of a paint with me episode, but I like to keep the titles consistent. So this time, I was watching the J-Wits channel. Great channel if you don't know him, lots of fun Pokemon and Nintendo related content. And he made this really cute craft project where he turned his old Pokemon cards into 3D art. It was really cute. And in his video, he mentions an Instagram user called Lanumbra, who I immediately followed on Instagram because their work was really cool to look at. I don't know if they started the trend or if they were the first one to think of it, but this person takes Pokemon cards and uses acrylic paint to flesh out the image over the entire card. So you end up with this kind of unique looking, one-of-a-kind Pokemon card, if you will. I know we use the hashtag oak a lot in the doll world, so this is like an oak card. I felt really inspired, so I knew I had to try it. And I went through all my Pokemon cards and tried to find duplicates. You know, in case I really mess this up, I won't be too sad that I've ruined a card. And I thought we'd start with little Bounsweet here. So the first thing I did was gesso up all the areas I was going to cover. And I worked a little gesso into the image itself, just so that I can transition my paint work into the printed image without too much of a seam line. From what I've seen, the way Lanumbra does it is they get their paint very flat. It almost looks like the card was printed that way. I'm not being that careful here, so mine's gonna have a lot of texture, a lot of acrylic brush strokes, but that's okay. I'm doing this more for fun. At first, I was gonna put a whole bunch of different kinds of tropical flowers around Bounsweet, with some birds of paradise, and I don't know the names of the other flowers, but you know what I was going for, Alola vibe flowers. But I guess I got a little lazy and I just decided to repeat the white flower over and over again into the foreground. You can see the outline of a bird of paradise in the top right corner, but that gets covered up later. I also thought that just having the white flowers would keep your focus on Bounsweet and lead your eye to Bounsweet. At some point I realized that my paints were a lot brighter and more saturated than the printing on the card, so I took the opportunity to saturate Bounsweet's leaves and I boosted the color a little bit on the original print. Little by little, I fill in all the leaves and the petals and all the flowers, and they're not perfect. You know, some of them are kind of wonky shapes, but just don't look too close. Oh yeah, to keep the card from sliding around while I was painting on it, I just took some of that sticky tack. I think it's called different things in different countries, but in America we call it sticky tack. I just put some of that on the back. For some final touches to make Bounsweet's card look really finished, I come back in with a dark green and outline a lot of the flowers and leaf shapes. Bounsweet's done! I really like this one. It came out super saturated. Next up we have this Skarmory card. I went ahead and pre-gessoed the rest of the cards, so you won't see me do that again. But I do work a little more gesso into the foreground to blend the image. And I was thinking we could make this into a scene. So like a territorial dispute between two Skarmorys fighting in the sky. So with brown paint, I sketch out the second foreground Skarmory and just start blocking in colors that are similar to the colors in the illustration, trying to get that metallic look. I struggled a bit with this card because I'm not great at landscapes, especially very distant mountains, landscapes. I love artwork that can do that. There's some people I went to college with that could make these beautiful landscapes, concept art for games and stuff like that. I felt like I could never quite get there, but I'm gonna give it my best shot. And besides, I tried to hide most of it behind the foreground Skarmory. Even though I was consciously trying to work in more color to this card, whether it was the red wings and the bright blue sky that fades to yellow, somehow the whole composition still ended up a little bit gray. For example, if you squint your eyes, everything sort of mushes together. And that means I needed more contrast in the card, but it's too late now. Of the 3 cards I paint in this video, I think this one changed the most. I did a lot of painting on top of the original illustration. For example, I wanted the lighting to be very dramatic and dynamic, so I put a wash of that sky yellow color all over the right side of the image to cover up his wings, and then I came back in with a very hot red-orange color to paint on top of the wings again, so I could get a very bright backlighting kind of look, as if the light is shining through his wings. I did take this chance to use my metallic acrylic paints to make the foreground Skarmory look really shiny and shimmery. It's not showing up too well on camera right now because it's reflecting back as white, but trust me, it's silver. I thought it made it look kind of like a holographic card, so that's a fun gimmick. The other pretty major change I made to this original Skarmory is I just got rid of his legs. In the original artwork, he's either standing on a mountain peak, or his legs are just lined up with the mountain peak in the background, and I thought that looked like a pretty funny tangent. And then when I put my foreground Skarmory in, that was another tangent with his feet, and it just wasn't working, so the feet had to go. The last thing I did to try to save the card from the gray problem, the no contrast problem, was to add back in those dynamic clouds that were in the original piece. It's very much an anime-esque action line sort of dynamic, but I thought they added a lot to the card, and I'm glad I put them back in. The last piece I'm going to work on is this Pikachu, and this Pikachu card might be very familiar to all of you who are my age as your first Pikachu card. Now, this was a pretty common card, and I myself had about 7. But it still felt a little funny painting on top of this because it is so familiar and it's very nostalgic and it has a lot of intrinsic value. So it almost felt like I was defacing this precious artifact. But I'm glad I went through with it because I think this one turns out really good. Starting with the background first, I take some dark browns and black and dark greens and fill out the trees and some of the background elements. And taking the same dark brown paint, because I already had it mixed up, I go ahead and fill in the shadow under the Pikachu and start blocking out the dirt path. Then coming back with some warm browns and some cool browns, I try to make the dirt path look a little bit more interesting. And I'm not sure if it comes across in the final card, but I was aiming for dappled lighting. I think it started out dappled and then it just sort of became dirt again. I don't know what happened to it. At any rate, at least there's some variation in the dirt, so it looks more interesting. A lot of times when I'm just painting dirt or grass, it can become a single blob of color, and it's not very fun to look at. So over the years, I've had to train myself to give a little more attention to stuff like that, because it's worth it in the end. And I come back in one more time with the gesso to draw the leaves and foreground elements again because I covered it up with the dirt. And then at last we can get to work painting all the plants and the grass that's next to Pikachu. It's subtle, but you can see I'm trying to work in some of the lilac color into the shadows as well to make the entire color scheme work together. And lastly, Pikachu himself. I tried my best to mix up yellows and browns to match the exact colors on the card. I didn't quite get a perfect match, but I tried to blend it in so it's not that noticeable. And I also intentionally gave Pikachu a bit of a lighter belly to match the older artwork of Pikachu. With a couple darker elements and some outlines and highlights, Pikachu's done. Here's a look at the before and after of each card. I have to say, this was a really fun exercise. It wasn't too mentally taxing because we already have a jumping off point. So if you're ever stuck looking at your sketchbook and you're in the mood to draw or paint and you can't think of anything, I think this is a really good craft. So if you guys ever want to have a fun time doing a craft and you have a lot of duplicate Pokémon cards lying around, this is definitely something I would recommend trying. Oh, I wanted to mention, I also put 2 or 3 layers of varnish over the tops of the cards once they were fully dry, just to protect the artwork, because they are flexible cards after all. You don't want to accidentally bend it and then have all your acrylic pop off the front. And with that, they're all done. I have to admit, they look pretty cute when they're lined up in the binder with all my other Pokemon cards. They almost look like special editions, you know, artwork edition. Thank you so much for joining me for this Sketch With Me, Paint With Me video. And let me know if you guys have ever done this before. I think it's a really fun idea. And let me know which Pokemon cards you used. I'll catch you in the next video. Stay artsy! Annyeong!